see you there. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's staying safe during this pandemic. Thanks for joining me on Kickin' It Back Music Lessons with me, Dylan King. Today we're just going to be learning a couple things. A couple basic musical foundations, such as the staff, the clefs, and most importantly, how the notes are named. Those are just a few things we'll be doing as we go through your journey, your musical adventure with me, Dylan King. Let's get right to it. Alright, let's get down to business. So, this is going to be your musical adventure, Dylan's Guide to Learning Music. So first we're going to learn about the staff. Now the staff is a set of 5 horizontal lines and 4 spaces that represent a different musical pitch. When we read music, we read on stabs. And that's what this is. It's just the 5 musical lines, and depending on the clef, which we'll get to, will tell us what note is going on in between each staff or each space. Each line or each space. So, if we look at this slide, this is the grand staff. This is what pianists read. If you're playing piano, you'll be reading this. The top is the treble, treble clef. The bottom is going to be the bass clef. And this is what we'll use to read music. But we'll get more into that as we continue on. So, how notes are named. Musical sounds, or notes as they are often known, are named after the first 7 letters of the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that's it. Just those letters. There will be variations when we continue on, making them either sharp or flat, but just for now, let's just stick to the basic 7 letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And as you keep going, it will repeat over and over. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Just over and over. Those are the 7 notes that we discuss in Western music. So, we're looking at the clef. This is what we use to read the indicated pitches on a staff. So there are 4 types of clefs: treble, bass, alto, and tenor. For the purposes of what we're going to do now, we're just going to look at treble and bass. Alto and tenor are less common seen clefs, and you will rarely see them unless you're playing a specific instrument or a specific part for it. But for the most part, you're just going to see treble and bass, which also occur on the grand staff. So let's first look at the treble clef. The treble clef, also known as the G clef, because it kind of looks like a G, and when you're actually drawing it, the curl at the bottom of the clef occurs around the G line. It's the top clef for a piano on the grand staff. You'll also see this clef in instruments, most band instruments, or if you're singing a top part, you'll see treble clef. If you play saxophone or trumpet, things like that, you'll most likely be playing out of the treble clef. So the other clef that we're going to look at is the bass clef. The bass clef, also known as the F clef, is going to be the bottom clef on the piano and for the grand staff. And it's the F clef because it kind of looks like an F, and also because where those 2 dots are, they'll be circling the F line, which will be another good indication of how you're going to determine the letters and certain pitches that are found on the staff. So let's take a little cat break. This is my cat, and just because you just learned a lot of information, let's just take a look at him. Isn't he so cute? Aw. Alright. So let's look at the treble clef notes on the staff. So if we look at them, starting on the bottom, it's going to go from C all the way up to A. So those extra lines where the C and the A are, those are known as ledger lines, and that's just to extend the staff, because we can't fit every note on just those 5 lines and 4 spaces, so we like to extend it if we're trying to reach a note that's either higher or lower. So some easy ways to find out what the notes are making little, mnemonic devices to help you figure them out. So if we're just going to look at from the bottom line of the treble clef to the top line of the treble clef, we can make an acronym. So it's going to be E, G, B, D, and F. Now you can come up with many different ones, many different mnemonic devices to help you figure this out. The one I learned in school, which we're going to use today, is going to be every good boy does fine. Pretty simple. So if you're looking at a line from the bottom up, it's going to be every good boy does fine. That's how you can figure out. And then the spaces in between are also pretty easy to figure out. If you notice, it's going to be F, A, C, and E. That spells face. Hey, that's pretty easy. So now we have two pretty easy mnemonic devices for figuring out notes. Every good boy does fine, and face for the spaces. So, the ones above the mnemonic devices that we learned are just ones that you kind of have to go about learning. You know, maybe you can think of it as, for the face, you can think of it as deface, like the D and then face. That can help you also figure it out. But as you practice more and you keep looking at this, eventually it will just become second nature and you'll be able to read it. And so those ledger lines below it is also just going to be, you know, C is right below that first ledger line and A is above that second one. Alright, let's move on. So, as we looked at before, every good boy does fine, and then face. Pretty easy ones to help you figure out. So now let's look at the bass clef notes on a staff. So, essentially the bass clef is for the more bottom part, like we talked about, especially on a piano. And because the way music is written, the notes that you see on a bass clef are not the same that you're going to see on a treble clef, which can be confusing sometimes. But if you just, you know, stick to these mnemonic devices, which are also shown on this one, it'll be really easy to figure out. So if you're used to treble clef, like I was when I was first learning, something that's really easy that helped me after a while is, like, for example, if you look at the A, so normally on a treble clef that's an F, but one space above that's an A. I used to just kind of think of it as like putting it down one, and that's how I'd figure it out, but that doesn't work for everybody, so let's stick to the mnemonic devices. If we're looking at the lines on the bass clef, we're looking at G, B, D, F, and A. So we can use the mnemonic device, good boys do fine always. Hey, that helps. And if we're looking at the spaces, it's going to be A, C, E, and G. So we can use all cows eat grass. Not too bad. So if you just use those and keep practicing, you'll be able to figure these out in no time. Takes a little bit of practice, but if you want to be good at something, everything takes practice. So yeah, there we go. Good boys do fine always, and all cows eat grass for the spaces and the lines. Alright, so that's going to end out this lesson with one last little cat break. Good job today, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't see you there. Thanks for joining me back again this week. Hope everyone's staying safe out there. This week on Kickin' It Back Music Lessons with me, your host, Dylan King, we're going to be going over a couple more things, briefly looking at the notes on a piano. We're going to be looking at tempo, rhythm, and just how we count music and subdivide so we can read music on staff, things that we learned last week. So, let's get right to it. Alright. Let's get down to business. So, if we look here, we're just going to look at the notes on a keyboard. If we remember from last lesson, all the notes that are in music are the first 7 letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they just keep repeating over and over. As we can see, they're just repeating throughout the entire keyboard. So, learning the notes on a piano is simply a matter of memorizing the location of the notes. So, right here is where we like to start, at middle C. So that just occurs if we're looking between the 3 black notes and the 2 black notes that repeat in pattern. It's going to be to the right of those two in the middle, closer to the 2 black notes. And then from there, if you want to, you can just count up C, D, E, F, G, A, keep counting up or down to figure out where the notes are. And as you keep practicing, you'll be able to memorize them more easily. Alright, let's talk about tempo. So tempo is talking about the speed at which music is played. And right here you can see there's a tempo marking at 40 beats per minute, Adagio meaning slower tempo. So if we're talking about tempo, we're talking about the pulse, you know, the beat at which a piece of music is played. So let's say if it was at 150, you're going to hear more, a little bit of a faster tempo. And then if you're talking about a slower tempo, like here, it says Adagio, it'll be maybe slower. Much slower. So, you know, depending on the tempo marking, you'll be playing at a faster or slower tempo will determine the speed of the music. So let's just take a normal speed, maybe near more the middle at 100. That's about near the middle. So what we're going to do is move on, looking at the value of notes. So we're going to talk about rhythm. The 4 rhythms we'll talk about today are the whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. So let's take this tempo, in which the speed of the music, and let's talk about 100, right? So if we're talking about a whole note, it's going to be, in most music, 4 beats for what we're talking about now. So here's the pulse. A whole note, if we're clapping on the emphasis, is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lasting about 4 beats. Moving on, let's talk about a half note. And a half note is going to be half of a whole note, so that's going to be 2 beats. Pretty easy, right? So we're back at our tempo. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Pretty simple. Moving on to the next one, quarter note, which is half of a half note or a quarter of a whole note, is going to happen every single beat. So back to our tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, happening every single beat. Pretty simple. And moving on to the last one, eighth note, which is going to be half of a quarter note, or an eighth of a whole note, if you want to think of it like that. So that means every time a beat happens in our tempo, there's going to be 2 eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So then in music, you'll be able to see them written together. And that's it. Pretty simple. So if we're going to review, whole note, 4 beats, half note, 2 beats, quarter note is going to be every single beat, and then an eighth note is going to be twice per beat. Pretty simple. Good job. Thanks for joining me, Dylan King, on your musical adventure, Kicking It Back Music Lessons. I had a fun time and I hope you guys did too. Just take what you learned and apply it, and you'll be able to be a great musician in no time. I'll see you guys later, and everybody stay safe.